Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Sunday. I hope you all are having a restful one, that the tail end of your weekend is helping you recover for the upcoming week, and that you're spending some time with your loved ones. How are you all doing? Please go ahead and put that in the comments below. I'd love to know what's going on in your life. I know that for each and every one of us, it has taken a lot of courage to get here in our life, in our business, and being so vulnerable is such a challenge. And it's taken me that courage to get here as well. So thank you so much for taking time to listen to this. And I've been so appreciative of listening to all of your stories as well. And I've been very encouraged by them. You all are beautiful individuals. Each of you is a soul that cannot be replaced. You have an important job. You are not just a number in the business or lost in a sea of faces in life. You all have a very important purpose to contribute. Figuring out what to talk about today was very difficult for me. I had a few days to process everything, and I was trying my best to be upbeat and positive and be a cheerleader for you all. But I'm going to be honest that I don't have that in me today, and that's not what my topic is about. I've been wrestling for the past few weeks with some emotions that I often detach and dissociate from and set to the side. And what I've been realizing is that sometimes the topic comes up in the emotions that we do not want to embody. And that's exactly what happened to me. Last night, I didn't sleep very well. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I had an anxiety attack. I realized that all of the emotions I had set aside is what eventually resulted in the panic that I had. But lucky for you all, after waking up my husband, finding what I needed to do to calm down and reset, I now have a topic for you. Some of you may recognize the title of this, and some of you may not. Who told you? Fill in that blank. If you're familiar with the Bible, this question is seen in the very first book of Genesis. It's in the story known as the Fall of Man. And a quick synopsis for you who are not familiar with that. Basically, God created the world. God created Adam and Eve, man and woman, and they lived in harmony, all three of them together, in the garden. God gave them everything. God gave them the ability to do anything, and there was one thing God asked them to avoid, and that was to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil in their garden. Eventually, a serpent comes into the story, and this serpent was able to speak and deceive the man and woman into saying that God was keeping something from them, and so that's why God didn't want them to eat the fruit. Both of them ate the fruit, and afterwards, their perception and reality changed. They both looked at each other and realized they were naked. They looked at themselves and realized that they were naked, resulting in guilt, shame, and fear for their actions. They went and hid, and when God comes back to greet them, they explain to God that they've had a sudden realization that they're naked. And that wasn't a concept they realized until after the act that they had decided to do of eating from the tree. And God asked a very profound question that I believe is often overlooked when this story is addressed. And the question was, who told you that you were naked? You guys can fill in that blank with whatever's going on in your life. If you want to share it, you're more than welcome to. But God asked them, who told you that you were naked? God never told them that. I know at the end of the story, we focus on the concept of sin. We have an explanation of why we're seeing evil, sadness, depravity in our world. But I left last night wondering that what if, even if Adam and Eve had chosen to eat from the tree that God asked them not to, and had the sudden reality of knowledge that they were naked, what if still in that moment they could have realized that that action was wrong, yet not fallen into guilt and shame and fear with it? And they could have come to God, realizing they were exposed, but believing what God had actually said about them, and to stop living in that deception that the serpent brought into their heads. Now, this question, what happens when we omit this question? It's a scary reality, and we're unaware of this question a lot. We often avoid it, like me. We set it to the side because it makes us so anxious and afraid to address. Who told you? Society will tell you who to be, how to act, who to embody, and who to become. We follow this path, and often the result is depression, feeling dissatisfied, and feeling extremely confused. What happens if we address that fear, whatever you've put to fill in that blank? Maybe it's who told you that you wouldn't succeed? Who told you that your dreams were stupid? Who told you that signing up for LimeLife was a mistake? This is where mindset comes in, and mindset is such a powerful tool because we are powerful. We are capable of changing our own mindset. The truth is, you all are God's highest form of creation. You're the most valued form of creation. God is the most creative spirit, and when God breathed life into each and every one of you, God also gave you the beautiful gift of creativity. Nothing was held back. You have every single bit of God's creativity as well, because we're image bearers of God. So not only can we fill in that blank, we have power to do that. We have power to put that in our minds. We also have the power to completely change it. You can change it into the narrative that you want for your story and for your life. People think that this means don't be afraid. And I want to address that fear is normal. There is no way to avoid this in our life. Sometimes fear is healthy. It lets us know when something is wise to do and when something is unwise. So it's okay to be afraid. What is not okay is to let that thought dictate your actions, your life, and your future. So instead of saying, don't be afraid, or instead of being afraid, let's go ahead and dive in to what you are afraid of. Confront the situation, recognize it, and realize you have the ability and the power to change it. And you can use that to change your situation and to shape you into the person that you want to become. The past 2 years of my life, up until about this past May, so 2 months ago, my life has been very difficult, and it was one of the most difficult times in my life I've ever been through. All in one, I went through a faith crisis. I went through an identity crisis. I went through a career crisis. My husband had a health scare. And I already suffer with depression, but now I was severely depressed. In this moment, I tried so hard to get back into the former identities I once believed in. I tried so hard to follow what society asked me to be. Almost every night I cried. I wanted to be normal, and I tried to fit back into the clothes that used to fit me, and I begged God almost every night to turn me back into that godly Christian, godly wife, godly mother, and godly woman that I once was and that I was told to be. And the more I tried, the more it hurt, and the more anxious and depressed I became. Fast forward to a year later, I decided to put in the work to go to counseling. It was one of the toughest decisions I had ever made, but it was one of the most rewarding journeys. It completely changed my story around. I spent so much time in my life, even prior to these 2 years, trying to be what people wanted me to be. I tried to follow what the systematic church asked me to be as a woman and as a wife and as a mother and as a parent, and it wasn't working out for me. I tried to follow everything that society has told me to be up to this point. And last night I realized in my anxious state that I was believing things that God never told me. So who told me these things that I was afraid about? And that's something you can ask yourself. Who told you whatever you have in your blank right now? Now I'm in a much better place. Don't get me wrong. I have more good days than bad now. But because that muscle in my life of changing my mindset and working on realizing that I now have control is still being exercised, I often wrestle with falling back to the old patterns of how I used to think. And I now have strategies to cope with it, but I still have a lot of challenging days too. What's interesting about all of this is once I hit that turnaround in my life, once I decided that I had power to be whoever I wanted to be, to not listen to whatever people said about me, to reject that, and to follow in the truth of who I'm supposed to be, LimeLife showed up. I don't think that's a coincidence. During this time when LimeLife showed up, I finally found a lot of peace that I am not a normal person, and that's okay. I'm very different, and that's okay. I accepted that God told me to live in this truth and embrace it instead of constantly begging God to take it away, resulting in fear and guilt constantly, every day. Again, it was not a coincidence that after this peace arrived, LimeLife showed up in my life. Now, if there's one thing that you get from this topic that's been brought up, I want you to remember just one thing. Whatever society, people, your family, your friends, your community, your church, your faith, your religion, whatever it says about you, you can choose to accept that or reject it. You have the power to do that. You have the power to completely change your narrative. You're empowered to say who you really are and to live in that truth. So I want to encourage you all today to change that fear narrative. And instead of living in the who told you that, whatever you have in that blank, change that to accepting and rejecting who and what you want to be, what you want to do, what you want your life to look like. You have the power to change your own destiny and to live in abundance and peace and calmness of mind instead of the fear that often tries to bring us back into whatever and whoever has told us to be. Thank you so much for listening. God bless. Love you all. Take care.